Hey guys, welcome to the Myers Method Multifamily Meetup. We have a virtual meetup once a month, and we get together and we talk about multifamily and anything else that our tribe wants to talk about. We're here to support the pack. We're here to support each other, and we want to make sure that we're continuing to provide value to people that we're connected with. My name is James Bryant. Of course, you have Jerome Myers, who is going to be leading our presentation. So Jerome, see what you got, man. What we're going to talk about.
Before I do that, in case people have to drop off early, I know people's schedules are crazy. Just want to offer you guys some free resources. So for those of you who don't know me, I think I've talked to most of you once before, but for those of you who don't know me, Jerome Myers, I do a few things. The thing that we're talking about today is in our Myers Methods organization, and it's real estate education. And so we have a combination of free and paid resources through Myers Methods of multifamily investing. And so if you want to grab our free 4-step guide to getting into multifamily investing, hop over to myersmethods.com and we'll trade you that guide and an audio interview for your email address. And then if you are a podcast listener and you're looking for some content that helps you stay encouraged and shows you that good things are happening in the world, it's sometimes hard to find stuff like that, then I encourage you to check out the Dreamcatchers podcast. We have stuff on YouTube as well as on all your major podcasting platforms, including iTunes and Stitcher, SoundCloud, all those guys. So today, our conversation is going to be about how we increased our revenue by 62% at a property that we bought back in July of 2018. This one is super special for me. Really got some folks into the space that hadn't been in the space before as far as multifamily investing. We came in, we took down this deal. We bought it for $840,000. And we are now valuing it closer to about $1.6 million. And so with that as kind of the intro, here's our agenda. I'm gonna run through my biggest mistakes because I don't want you guys to walk away feeling like I have all the answers. I have a bunch of answers because I messed up a lot along the way. Talk to you about the roadblocks to getting into multifamily for those of you who don't own and for those of you who are trying to scale your business. Then we're going to run through this case study that we've kind of teased everybody with, offer you some more free resources, and then do Q&A. I've kind of went back and forth on whether we should have Q&A along the journey. So if you've got a pressing question, go ahead and unmute and ask me while I'm going through the content. That way I can address it and not have to wait till the end and bounce back and forth through the presentation. We'll wrap it up. So all the red writing at the bottom just says, I don't know what I'm talking about. If you want legal or accounting advice, go talk to those people who are licensed to do those things. So my most costly mistakes, I am self-taught, and James and I have learned a ton along the way as we've operated things and as we've just kind of listened to different people who are educators. And I've decided that the way that we've did it was probably the most inefficient and ineffective way to do it. I was listening and still do listen to about 40 hours of content each week. And a lot of that was fear. It was fear of me missing something or not knowing something I was supposed to know, or I would hear something and it would contradict with something else. And I would go down this rabbit hole with trying to figure out what I truly believed and what I agreed with. I made a lot of modeling mistakes early on. I didn't have anybody looking over my shoulder. And the model's great until you actually have the actuals come in and you don't know what's going to be what, or you have surprises and you have to write checks that you didn't expect to write. I've underestimated rehab budgets, and that's great when you're doing a single family home. I think I heard Colette mention that she's working on a rehab. Well, if you're off by $2,000 on a single family home, whoop-de-doo. If you're off on a 23 apartment unit with that same $2,000 mistake, very quickly you get up to $500,000. So, making a mistake on the rehab budgets magnifies itself, especially if it gets carried across a number of different units. And then I think probably the biggest mistake that we've made so far is not properly vetting our property manager. We took a risk on somebody who was very present and vocal and appeared to have the bandwidth to help us with the property. But when we actually got into the project, and it was this project in particular, we realized really quickly that they didn't have the resources needed in order to execute against our business plan. So the challenges of getting into multifamily. Everybody has the same 4 challenges. I don't care where you are. And the thing that most people don't get is the sequence in which you should solve your challenges. Many people say, I don't have any money, so I can't do a deal. The money doesn't really matter if you don't have any experience, because the biggest partner, the bank usually, is not going to lend to you without experience. Well, if you don't have any experience, that doesn't really matter if you don't have a deal, because you don't have to apply that experience. You don't have a deal to apply that experience against. And then when you get to the foundation, which is knowledge, if you don't have the knowledge, you can't tell the difference between a lead and a deal. Lead and deal have the same letters. They're in different orders. One is something you buy. One is something that somebody wants you to buy. And so we believe that knowledge is core and foundational to everything that we do in multifamily investing. And so that's part of the reason why we started Myers Methods. We wanted to be able to help people acquire the knowledge they need to enter into the space. Back in like 2001, 2002, Deron and I were sitting on the stoop at our apartment complex, and we didn't know anybody that had multifamily experience. And so from that space, we kind of searched and sought and looked for people who did, and we just didn't meet anybody. I'm a son of a soldier and a stay-at-home mom. We just didn't have wealthy people come into our homes. And so when we thought about rental property, like a lot of people I know, we thought about buying houses. But when Deron and I were sitting on the stoop, we did the math. I was paying $395. I had 2 roommates paying $395. He lived in the apartment below us. They were doing the same thing. We multiplied it all out. The guy was making $700,000 a year top line revenue. And for us, it was like, well, we've never seen him. We never talked to him. We want to go do that. And that way our income is decoupled from our time. And we went off and we kind of put that stuff on the shelf. And now it's coming full circle. We got back into that. And so in 2016, I started doing this stuff full time. The knowledge gap was bridged for me by doing podcasts, books, YouTube. And even though I was a part of the RIA, we never talked about it, but some RIAs do actually have a multifamily component. And so if you want to go down the same path I went, where you don't spend a lot of money or very little money, then these are the ways that you can actually do that. What I will tell you is most days I was confused, overwhelmed, and then I became overconfident, which led to other mistakes that I made. And then when I actually realized that I made mistakes, I ended up really frustrated. And it wasn't just frustrated because I messed up, but it was frustrated because I had to write a check, or it's frustrated because I might be letting my partners down. And so there was a whole lot of stuff riding on that. So what I will tell you guys is there's a ton of information out there. You can go out there and try to soak up the whole ocean with a paper towel, or you can find somebody that you know, like, and trust, and work with them to get your core multifamily investing knowledge base from one source, and then go supplement from others. And so here's a teaser. I imagine either you got an email from somebody, you saw a social media post. We sourced this deal through direct mail. And through the direct mail, we found out, hey, so we just sent a letter, say, hey, we're interested in buying your property. The owner called me back off of the number that was at the bottom of it. His name was Lee. I went out and met with Lee, toured the property, told me what was going on. We did, through our due diligence, I asked for financials. And this is what he sent as one of the years of previous income statements for us. And you'll see that he made about $73,000 that year in top line revenue. He was running a really lean expense ratio. And we were like, wow, this seems like this property is underproducing. And so we started digging and digging and digging. We created a model, made a ton of mistakes in that model, but we were able to come to a place where we felt like the property made sense to purchase. And so the issue at the property was that they weren't collecting enough revenue. And so this is a 20-unit apartment building. They had a number of units that were vacant, and they didn't have the money in hand. This was the father and son that owned it. They didn't have the money in hand to make the investments to take the property to the next level. And I think at this point they were either renting the units at 490, 475 or 500. And then the vacancy is what took out the rest of that income. And so our short-term strategy going into this deal was to increase desirability. We're going to do that by upgrading the tenant base and to do some continued property improvements. And we thought that that would lead to increased income. And so the plan was to increase occupancy as well as increase rents. And sometimes those things go hand in hand. Other times they kind of fight with each other. And we can talk through that a little bit as we get a little bit deeper into our dive. Just to show you guys the full strategy, we also plan to reduce expenses. And so one of the things that we were doing was paying a lot in vacant unit utility bills. And as we got into this deal, we wanted to recoup our capital reserve. And then after people got replaced, we wanted to minimize evictions, but we did quite a few in the beginning. And so to increase desirability and to kind of increase our income, we renovated all these units. And so I think it's like 14 or 15 new units. We placed 14 new tenants. At the time when we completed this, we'd increased our rent per unit per month by about 125 bucks. We had one unit ready for move-in. That one's been filled since this time. We completed 9 evictions over the process. And so if you think about 20 units and you evicted 9 people, you can tell that, you know, things got pretty rough at the property. There were some issues with the parking lot patching. And so this was increasing desirability, right? Increasing the curb appeal. We patched the parking lot. We added a concrete pad for dumpsters because they were in pretty poor locations from our perspective. Added some really nice signage, upgraded exterior lightings, did shutter repair and painting, new mailboxes, front doors. We removed storm doors from all of the units because they were in really bad shape, and we felt like it was just another part that needed to be fixed or replaced or maintained. And so we'd rather remove that and go with a more hardy door. We did some gutter repair because some of them were hanging. And then the last thing that we did was some landscaping. And so you'll see that all this focus was on the outside, because what we've seen, learned, experienced is when you pull up on the property, nobody can tell what anybody's inside looks like. And so whether a unit's renovated or not. And so you'll see A hasn't been renovated. UTS, those units haven't been renovated, but nobody knows that those units haven't been renovated when they pull up. They just know that they're coming in to see a new unit. And so here's an example of a kitchen upgrade. So, you know, we didn't paint the cabinets in this one. We've started painting the cabinets since then, but we changed the countertop, changed the sink, changed the flooring, new oven range. You know, we just cleaned up, changed the paint color, LED lights. Like we've touched all of the things that most of the residents will look at and say, hey, this is nice, instead of just kind of leaving stuff in a pretty rough condition. What I will say is this is a strategy that a lot of people just throw out there. Hey, we're going to go and we're going to renovate the units, and then we're going to raise rents by $100 and we'll be able to increase the value of the property. If the property isn't in a place where you can actually achieve that rent premium, if the unit isn't actually rented below market rent, you're not going to be able to have that success on the backside. When we talked to the owner and we told him before closing what our plan was, he was like, Jerome, I don't know. I think you might be able to raise rents $50, but to raise rents $100 or $125 just seems a little crazy to me. And we kind of proved them wrong. So over here, you'll see, you know, we came in, we had a bunch of vacants, and some of them we didn't know were vacant. People moved out in the middle of the night. The gray color means that this is below average rent. The green means it's above average rent. And what you want to see is a trend of more stuff turning green as you progress through the project. So you'll see that we took this over. Everything was renting at $525. We started getting some new folks in at $625. $630. And then when we changed property managers, we were able to start getting some folks in at $685. And so you'll see over here So I guess the first piece of the project, we had one property manager until about here, and they were saying, oh, well, we can't really give 625, 630. That's all we can get. As after we got the new property manager in, they started putting their touches on stuff. You start seeing things go to 685, which is really driving up rent. Then somebody moves in with the pet, you get the extra pet rent and some late fees, and you start seeing your revenue really grow. So for 2017, the previous owner, Lee, he collected $73,000 in rent. Our first year owning the property, and so that would have been from July of 18 until the end of June of 18, we collected about 106,000. When you take all of 2019 and just go end to end on 2019, we collected 118. And I just did it again to see where we're at now. And so for the last 12 months, we're at 122. And so you're seeing us capture that market rent gap. And so this is what we talked about in the post. Between the 72 and the 118, we jumped up about 62%. And we call that about 18 months. We think about property management and the way that we look at the data a little bit differently than kind of what's common. A lot of people are doing stuff off of reports, and we're really big on pictures. And so what you'll see is we struggled, right? Our occupancy while we were going through the renovations was down in the 80s. We had some new people move in, and then they moved right back out. And so what you don't see is the first 6 months of this life cycle. But what you get is kind of what we call a double dip or double. When you think about the 2008 recession, everybody in 2010 and 2012 was talking about it's going to double dip. Don't jump in back into the market. And so we turned once, we got people in, occupancy went up. Then it came time to turn again because they didn't stay. And then we were able to jump up here and start stabilizing. And so that part really excites us. And, February and March, when the numbers come in, we're going to be up there around the 97 percentile again. Our collected rents, you can see that we virtually doubled them, so in July of 18, and this was a little bit higher than what the previous owner was getting. If you think about, 73,000, that's like 60 or $6,000. And so we got one more unit than what they collected for the year before, but we virtually doubled it over the course of the same time. To show that we were actually having some success with our expenses, we drove down our expense per door. So what we do is we take our total expenses on a given month, divide that by the number of units we have to get our expense per door. And so what we want to do is be below this line. And you can see that we've stabilized and stayed below that line for several months now, probably almost a year. And then you see our expense ratio diving down as well. And so the expense ratio is calculated by taking your expenses in a given month and dividing that by the income collected in a given month. And so what we've been trying to do is just drive that thing down as low as we can while still taking care of the property. So for those of you who have single family, have been using single family as a strategy, what I can say is it's not a feasible way to really grow your passive income or your non-time allocated income. And so we started over here in July 18, we had, not that many doors in the portfolio, and we've been able to drive this up really, really, really aggressively. And this is probably right at $10,000 or so in collected income. And so you can kind of imagine what that number grew to over the past, 18, 20 months. James, I don't know if you're willing to chat through this. We didn't talk about it before, but this is your deal. So I just wanted to throw it in because for us, it's not all about making money. It's about making an improvement on the community. And so, James, if you'd be kind enough to talk through this,
Yeah, no problem, man. Thank you for the opportunity. One of the things that we talk about is just doing well while doing good. So Jerome walked through how the property has improved. And, you see things like, oh, the rent increased from 520 to 637 and rents are going to 675 and 685. Well, those were due to the results of us really improving the property and the living conditions. We didn't just come in and say, everything's, going to remain the same, but now we're going to put your rent up. The people that were leaving were people that we were in some ways encouraging to leave because they weren't fitting the profile of the tenants that we wanted. There were some undesirable characteristics that were going on there. And as we clean up the outside and as you clean up your units, those folks will start leaving. Some of the things that really broke our hearts when we were doing the due diligence on this one is, I walk in, there's a young lady, she has 3 small kids. They're hip huggers. They're like small, and you walk into the unit, the sink is busted up, not draining. They actually have to take some kind of a bucket or scoop and scoop the stuff in the sink out to in the backyard. There's mold coming down from some leak in the bathroom upstairs. It was just horrible conditions. And I remember talking to Jerome, and I'm like, when we buy this can't be us. We're not going to do this because we want to be able to provide a decent place for people to live. Is it going to cost more in rent from what it was when it was $475 or $525? Yes, because the previous owner, they were not keeping up with their maintenance issues, and maintenance issues were rising. And so we look at it, yes, it may cost more, but we're providing a much higher level of service, and we're going to make sure you have a safe, decent place to live. And I think, it's not to say that the tenants don't have any responsibilities, but I look at it as an owner. If we have the wherewithal to purchase this apartment complex, then we have the wherewithal to really provide a decent, safe place for people to live. And that's really what we try to do. So when we look at projects, when we're evaluating projects and we go through and we do the models and we're doing the due diligence, we're really all about the combination of these two, doing well while doing good. Jerome?
Great, man. So one of the things that was probably the most disgusting thing that I've seen and kind of ignored, but didn't realize that I was ignoring a problem, was a property that we bought in Richmond where the sewage pipe broke and it caused the backup in the units. And so when people would flush their toilet in an adjacent unit, sewage would back up into people's kitchen sinks and then overflow and run down the front of the cabinets. And we saw these stains, but we didn't really understand what it was. That's what it ended up being. It would back up in the showers. And so it was just a real mess. And that is a property owner's problem, not the residents. They've reported, and the property owner is responsible for fixing stuff like that. And then the other thing that we noticed in our due diligence, it's same Richmond property, was mud on sheets. So the property had a laundry facility. The people there, most of them didn't have vehicles. And so something happened in the laundry facility and the owner didn't repair it. And so we walked in and it was a little girl's bed. And I've got 2 little girls, for those of you who don't know. And I just thought about my kids having to sleep in a bed that looked like somebody jumped up and down on them with mud on their sheets. And, for me, it's kind of freedom fighting. I think some owners have cognitive dissonance because the residents don't look like them, or they can't relate to anybody who looks like them. And, one of the things that was important for James, Duran, the whole group of folks who've already participated or joined the Myers Methods movement, is taking care of those folks and treating them with dignity and respect, because they all deserve it. So if that's not your deal, we're very upfront about that. If it's all about making money for you and you don't care about the folks that are participating or folks that are calling your place home, our approach isn't for you. We buy things at a discount so that we can make these improvements as well as make money for folks. And so I just want to jump back to the free resources and let folks who jumped on maybe late or weren't paying attention early on, myersmethods.com to get the free 4-step guide. It'll tell you the quickest way that we know in order to get into multifamily. And then also check out the Dreamcatchers podcast. You can learn about me, James, Duran, a bunch of other folks who I consider superheroes. They're ordinary people doing extraordinary things, and I just want to be part of the conduit to help tell those stories. One thing I want to promote, I put the wrong flyer up here, but July 31st through August 2nd, we're going to have the Mid-Atlantic Multifamily Investing Conference. We were supposed to have it last weekend, and we were going to do some form of a recap, but because of COVID-19 and all of the closures and trying to be in compliance with what our leadership wants us to do, we decided to postpone it. So July 31st through August 2nd is when we're planning on having it. You can grab your tickets at myersmethods.com/con 2020. I've got 19 of my multifamily investing friends coming down to Greensboro, North Carolina, and hang out with me and share the good news. What I will tell you is you will not be able to find a speaker lineup as diverse and dynamic as this group. The majority of folks just go around the country saying the same thing over and over again. You're going to hear from people you've never heard from, with the goal of, meeting you closer to where you are and help you as well as stretch you to where you can go. And so I'd love to open it up for questions at this point. This is the end of prepared content for me, and just see if we can, help you guys figure out some stuff and get you moving on your journey.
Jerome, I got a question for you when you switched property managers. So what did the second property manager do differently than the first, and what did they see differently that allowed them to get that extra rent premium?
While Jerome is thinking about that, I would say the number one thing is that the second property manager shared our values. When we met with them and we talked to them about, making sure that we were able to, yes, drive profits, but also take care of the residents, the second property manager was absolutely in line. And the other thing that I would say is the second property manager looked at our business plan and said, yes, absolutely, we can do this. Whereas the first property manager looked at it and said, I don't know if you're going to be able to get what you're looking for in this area. Jerome, sorry, man, go ahead.
No, I think that's it. James has been on a journey with me, and so, he sees the whole thing. Duran as well. I think the few things, the extra rent. So they had another property around the corner. They were renting that for, I think they were renting it for like $725 after doing renovations. And so because they were already in market, they had a good feel for it. I think the way that they marketed the property was also another opportunity. And I think probably the last thing is they're just more aggressive. The previous property manager pretended to be really interested in occupancy after we had a few conversations. And so they wanted to make their job easier. And in fact, when we terminated them, they figured out a way, after we struggled through all this time with vacancy, they figured out a way to get the property full. Now, they told us a bunch of stuff. I remember James and I had a conversation about this unit. They said, well, we can't get 615, we can't get 625, we can't get 630 or whatever. We need to drop the rent down back to 550 or 575 in order to get somebody in there. That truly wasn't real, because, they got somebody in at 615, and then we were able to, again, get a bunch of other properties or extra other units leased at 685. And so I think they understood the property and the asset class a little bit better than the other property manager. The other property manager was moving over from single family to multifamily. This group had already executed a number of different value add opportunities for other owners, and they were actually owners themselves. So, the combination of those things allowed them to execute against our business plan. Is that helpful?
Yeah, it was. How did their pricing model relate one to the other?
We had one property manager. The first one, we were paying them 7%, but they also charged us a origination type thing where they were, filling out the model or, the accounting software. And so we paid a lump sum there. They also, instead of splitting late fees with us, they took all the late fees, and we thought, hey, we'll throw them that and to incentivize them to get our rents collected. Our new property manager charges us a flat percentage, and that's late fees, pet fees, all they take 8% of collected revenue.
That's good.
And it's actually been cheaper with the new property manager than it was for the original. And maybe cheaper is not the right word. Maybe it's cost effective.
Well, I mean, dollar for dollar, it was cheaper. So I agree with you there. Just as a percentage of rent, and I think we've got a better value as well. One thing that you don't, I guess, really appreciate is when you're collecting late fees, how much that can add to your bottom line because it drops down directly. There isn't an expense that offsets it. What else? Can't just be one question.
I got more, but I'll let somebody else jump in if they got one.
Go ahead.
So I got a question around, so the people that were in the property originally, obviously 9 of them had to be displaced for one reason or the other. You know, they're obviously there because the rent's affordable for them. If they have to go somewhere else, they still have to live somewhere. Do you guys have any ideas or thoughts, or maybe you've looked into this? How do you help those people get into something else somehow, or because you still care? I mean, you still care about them as people, and you know, that's one argument that I hear a lot is all these developers are coming in, they're just raising the rents, they're just making it hard to live here, and they don't care about the little guy, they don't care about, you know, the people they're displacing. So I've thought somewhat about how do you help those people get into a better living situation, but maybe just in a different location. Have you guys thought around that much?
So in Richmond, so when you've got a property manager that does more than just your property, they have some other alternatives, right? So for instance, the property manager we work with in Richmond, he manages almost 4,000 doors across Virginia and Maryland. And so he's got properties at different price points. And so people can move around. With that said, if somebody doesn't pay their rent, like you talked about the evictions, if somebody doesn't pay their rent, it's not because we're only evicting people if they're selling drugs or they're not paying their rent. And so we're not going to help somebody who doesn't pay their rent find a new place to live because they're stiffing us on where they live. It's not,
right.
And they just raise their rent 100% and the property isn't any better.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what happened is we had a lot of units that needed to be renovated. So when those renovated units were the ones that new tenants were moving into that had the highest rent premium. I think when we initially took over the property, we may have raised the rents on the existing residents by maybe $25 or something like that. So it wasn't a sharp increase. And our approach was not, hey, we're going to go in and raise the rents super high because we're going to get these people to move out of here because they're on month-to-month leases. No, our approach was let's get the vacant ones first. If there's somebody in there that's selling drugs or continue to have these old cars that they're working on in the parking lot that are really impeding our curb appeal, then we need to start dealing with those individuals first and those units first. So we upgrade the vacant units, take care of the curb appeal, the rents on those upgraded units continue to drive our net operating income higher. And as the other leases come up and those people decide to move on, I mean, the rental rate will increase, maybe not as steep. It's not going to go from $525 to $625 on someone that's been there. So it's not as if we're coming in and just turning people out by raising the rents. That's not our approach.
So maybe I missed it. Did you guys renovate all the units, or did you just rehab some of them?
We renovated on turns. And so, no, there's probably 5 of the 15 left.
Mm-hmm.
And so we do still have some legacy residents, and we have increased their rent, but not by the full board.
Okay.
Okay, so one question that I have, moving from single family homes to multifamily, you guys mentioned that, you hire a property manager. So that property manager is not an employee of yours. Do you guys have any employees such as maintenance or anything that are specifically dedicated to an apartment building or complex?
No. Everything we do is either contracted everything we do is contracted. The whole point is to be lean, and as soon as you start adding employees, you create something else that you have to manage. And so if we can funnel everything through the property manager, and that's the other great part about our property manager, they don't charge us a fee for coordinating the maintenance or running our renovations. They don't charge us any extra. It's just part of the fee. So if it's all inclusive, one flat fee, predictable pricing, we feel good about that as a business strategy.
And I think part of that is the space that we're in. We're in the 20 to 50 unit space for any given complex. And I think they start talking about when you get over 50 or you get towards 100 units, you will have to have some staff. But the units that we have are in that space where we don't have to have any staff on site. And so we're able to manage it through the property manager.
Okay, thank you.
I think a lot of people want to start getting employees because they see it as an opportunity to save some money, and air quotes on save. The reality of the situation is the headache that comes with the money that you save. It's probably never worth it, just at the highest level. So if the goal is to save money by hiring employees, you're in a losing battle.
Yeah, I think I was thinking of it in terms of, again, the mindset moving from single family homes to multifamily, like how frequently do you need a maintenance person, or how often you receive maintenance calls, and how quickly you can respond to them. So that's where I was really coming from when I asked that question.
Yeah. I don't have any real guidance. What I will say is the whole point for us was decoupling our time from our money.
Right.
If the phone call comes to us, then there's a requirement of us, versus we can schedule a meeting to talk to the property manager about whatever at this given time, right? Versus 24 hours, 7 days a week, you're on call. Like if I want to leave here and go to Egypt for a week, I've got to figure out where those responsibilities go. Today, I can just leave and I'll get to the property manager when I get back.
Right. Okay.
And he's not joking. I think that is what happened one time. He just left.
We did leave.
So I jumped on a little late. Maybe I missed this too, but how did you guys finance this deal? How did you do the value add, and then are you guys looking at refinancing this now that it's more stable, or maybe you already have?
We bought it we bought it with an 80% loan. We financed the rehab out of our investment, not construction money from the bank. And we're in the flip it phase. We're either going to refi or sell it.
What kind of returns are you guys looking at on this property?
Well, probably 2x to 3x the money that was invested.
How long was the duration?
We bought in July 18.
18
years.
Nice.
Or we'll take all of our money out and enjoy infinity returns. Just depends on what the market does with COVID.
Mm-hmm. Does any of the income on this property, is any of it from a voucher, or is it all just open market?
Everybody's market. We had one person that was on a voucher and she lost it right before our new property manager took over. And what's amazing about that is she pays late every month. So we get an extra 5% on her rent just out of kicks, and we haven't had to renovate it. So it's good. Nobody else? Ben, you got more. I see it on your face. What you got? Come on. I'll keep talking. I'll talk all.
So you're I'm trying to read it a little bit. So you're I forget how you said it. The 4-part Myers methods. I guess I'll call it program for lack of a better word.
Yeah.
Can you tell us more about that? What is that? And yeah, just more about what is that?
Well, Duran went through the class. Duran, is Cree there? How about you talk about? So Duran went through the 11-week course, but I mean, just at the highest level. So there's 4 things we do. We find deals, fund them, fix them, flip them. Flipping them is either a refi or selling it. Fixing it is executing a business plan. Funding it is all the due diligence stuff that everybody wants to talk about because it's the exciting piece. And then finding deals is just kind of shifting through stuff and deciphering what's a lead and what's a deal. If you look at the life cycle of a project, the first 6 months or so are related to finding it and funding it. Fixing it is probably 60 months, right? That's the longest duration, and nobody talks about operations. And so it's something that I wish more people would talk about, but it's boring. And then the flipping it is where you get your big chunk. We think people make money 3 ways. 1, from rent proceeds, the profits from those rents. 2, from a refi event if you decide to keep it and then continue to operate it. And then 3, when you sell it. We've created a system. So we've got an 11-week course. We've also got a community that folks can join on Facebook. It's a paid group with the thought process that if you're like Duran and I were, and you didn't know anybody who bought multifamily, you got to get around people that do that so that you can start forming relationships to go take down the deal. If we go back to the pyramid of challenges, capital is what a lot of people get hung up on, but the reality of the situation is knowledge is the most important piece. And so we created a course to help people with the knowledge challenge. Then they can go off and do their own deal flow, and we teach people how to get deal flow when they go through the course. And then the community, the Facebook group, is to help people with the experience piece. And within that community, you'll find folks with capital and you'll find folks with experience. And so we're trying to help people do these 2, and then this is where the real work happens, or these 3, 1, 2, 3, and then you do this work yourself. And so you find a deal, you bring it back to the pack. And I guess that's just kind of the thought James threw out tribe and pack early on. Wolves are communal, right? They're familial. And so everybody eats, right? And you go find a deal, you bring it back. You go find an elk, you bring it back. Everybody eats off the elk. We protect each other. A lot of folks operate as sharks, especially in the real estate space, and they want to take everything for themselves. They don't look to help anybody else out. And so if people align with our values, we want to go out and hunt together and then operate these properties in a socially respectable way. And so that's the whole logic of it. We help people with the knowledge so that they can go out and hunt on their own, find deals, bring it back, and we can apply experience and capital to get those deals done. Create wealth for not only us, but the children and those others to come.
Yep.
So I know I've listened to you talk on a few occasions, Jerome. I know you've mainly partnered with people that you've known for a lot of years and had good relationships with prior to. Are you guys partnering with new people, or is that kind of what does this program kind of qualify people that you might partner with, or what's the idea with that?
Yeah, so for right or wrong, the majority of people I know aren't accredited investors. I know a few, but the majority aren't. And so when you get into that sophisticated investor realm, it's really gray and loose. And so if I haven't known you for a long time and you know who I am, I know who you are, it's really difficult for me to get into a deal with that person for 5 years or 10 years or whatever the hold is. And so I want people to really know who I am and what I'm about. Right. So if we go do a deal together, they know what to expect. right? And so that's why we want people to have the same language, right? Look at deals the same way. And if you agree, great. If you don't, great too, because the last thing I want to do is get into a bad marriage, because that's what I think this is. When
Exactly.
finances together, you're there, and there is a prenup, right? We plan to get out at some point, but I don't want to bicker and argue with you along the way. You know who I am. I'm not going to change, right? This is who I am. You got a really good understanding of who I am and what I do, and you like that or you don't. And if you like it, then let's go do deals together. If you don't, then go do it the other way, and then we're going to, I say this kind of funny, we're going to buy that bad deal from you later on when your partnership blows up, because we bought something $400,000 under the appraisal price because their partnership blew up. And I mean, we look for those opportunities. And so that's why alignments of value, like I could talk numbers all day, but what really matters is the connection between the people in the deal. Your partners matter. And just meeting somebody, it's no different than marrying somebody after a one night stand. It just doesn't make sense. You got a whole lot to figure out.
Yep.
So would you guys look at projects in other markets other than your Virginia market and Greensboro, or?
Yes.
Yeah.
We're open to looking at other markets. But again, it's the person connection, the people connection that has to make sense. If we know someone and we have aligned values, then absolutely we're looking at other markets.
Okay.
Yeah. What I've struggled with a lot of the educators in the space is they want you to pay 30 or 40 grand for you to go raise money for their deal. And I don't really feel like you get any real experience that way. I feel like the true experience comes from hunting, finding your deals, having somebody else look over your shoulder to make sure that the deal makes sense. And if it's amazing, then there's other people that's going to want to be involved in the deal. And so naturally, we're jerry-rigging this thing for success.
Yeah.
Sorry.
And I don't get that model either from, I've passively invested in some deals, and I'm not real interested in investing in a deal that I know it's really a student that went and did it, and they don't have track record, and maybe they're kind of the one watching it all the time, but they've kind of purchased the balance sheet and the credibility track record of the coach to get the deal. And so to me as an investor, it's not a real appealing situation either.
Yeah. I mean, I guess, well, I don't know. Like I said, I'm self-taught, so I don't actually understand how it works. It doesn't make sense for me either, but people do it every day. I know somebody just 30 grand to think multifamily. And
A lot of thinking.
well, yeah.
But I mean, for any individual, you have to do what's going to work for you. We're all different. We're all wired differently. And if it works, great. If it doesn't, then that means that you need to do something different if you want to continue to grow in this space.
Mm-hmm.
Jerome self-taught. I kind of piggybacked off of him as he was going along with his journey. By no means would I consider myself to be a multifamily or real estate expert.
Come on, you look at a conference.
But I know enough to talk about what's going on, and working with Jerome and talking to him pretty much during the week. We talk every day. There's a daily check-in where we're talking about multifamily, talking about the investments that we have, and just continuing to be there to support each other. And part of what we do for the people that are involved with us is not just about the investment, but it's also about the investor or the partner. And we're interested in the partner and investing in that partner. So if there are mindset issues or emotional issues that you're dealing with, we're here and we have the tools to be able to help you walk through those things, particularly as it relates to your ability to invest or to move forward in your real estate ventures. And so we're interested in the entire person. So not just what you can do for us, but we're also interested in what we can do for you.
We're married.
So your program, what what's the like cost and time frame and structure of it? What does that look like?
It is a 11-week program. You get one module per week. It's probably, I don't know, James, what, 25 hours or so spread across 30 different modules. So there's a lesson each week and then probably 30 modules in it. And then in addition to that, we've got some supplemental material. We want you to read some books. We want you to listen to some specific podcasts. And I don't talk about price because we don't offer it to everybody. And so I do a one-on-one call, talk to the person, find out what they're about, if this is something that makes sense for them, if they actually have capacity to do a deal, right? Because the fact of the matter is, if you're going to go out and you've only got $2,000 in your bank account, this probably isn't the right move for you, right? If you want to be a deal lead. The thing that's really important from my perspective is making sure that, hey, I'm not taking a person's last and going through it that way. So we just don't offer it to everybody. It's exclusive because people could take it and use it for good or bad, because you will be able to show up in a room and sound like the smartest person who's got numbers of years of track record, and people will, unfortunately, if they're uneducated, they don't know, and they'll just put their money with you, and you can ruin everything. And that terrifies me.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions? Any other comments?
Appreciate it, guys. It's good stuff.
Hey, I'm going to be sending out a survey either later today or tomorrow just to get some feedback on our virtual meeting and our virtual event. Please feel free to provide any frank feedback and comments that you have, as well as suggestions for topics that we can address in the coming future.
Thank you for your time.
Go ahead.
Trevor,
I said thank you for your time.
Oh no, Trevor had a question. Go ahead, Trevor.
I had a comment.
Okay, go ahead.
I saw what I sent you, but
Yeah.
while I was looking at the presentation, I saw some pictures of some of the guys I know, like Will Martin, that's local.
Mm-hmm.
So it was funny. Him and I would text, and he said to tell you guys hello.
Well, tell him that we said hi, man.
Is that it?
All right. Thank you, guys.
All right, have a good one.